A dog prevents her owner from being taken off life support. The reason will make you cry. Jessica Hall stared out the window of her lakeside apartment, her weathered hands wrapped around a steaming cup of coffee. The morning sun painted Chicago's skyline in hues of gold, a sight she had grown accustomed to during her 20 years as a detective. But today was different. Today marked her first official day of retirement, and beside her sat Rex, her loyal German Shepherd partner, his chin resting on her knee. The decision to retire hadn't come easy. At 48, Jessica still felt the pull of the streets, the adrenaline rush of solving cases, and the satisfaction of making a difference, but something inside her whispered it was time for a change. The constant pressure, the late-night calls, and the emotional toll had begun to weigh heavily on her shoulders. "What do you think, boy?" she murmured, scratching behind Rex's ears. "Ready for a new adventure? If you found this story interesting, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give it a like. Tell us from which city you're watching us. Let's continue." Rex's intelligent brown eyes met hers, and she could swear he understood every word. Their connection went beyond the typical handler-canine relationship. They had faced countless challenges together, developed an almost telepathic bond that had saved their lives more times than she could count. The process of adopting Rex after retirement had been surprisingly smooth. Her superior, Captain Martinez, had always admired their partnership and understood that separating them would be cruel. With a few signatures and a heartfelt recommendation letter, Rex officially became her personal companion. As Jessica unpacked the last of her office belongings, her fingers lingered on a framed photo. It showed her and Rex on their first day as partners, both looking younger and slightly uncertain. Now, 7 years later, they were inseparable. The photo joined others on her living room shelf, a testament to their journey together. The morning stretched into afternoon, and Jessica decided it was time to establish their new routine. They headed to Lincoln Park, their favorite spot along Lake Michigan. The autumn breeze carried the scent of fallen leaves and distant rain. Rex trotted beside her, his posture still alert and professional despite his retirement status. Other parkgoers smiled as they passed, some recognizing them from their days on the force. Jessica had been something of a local celebrity, her cases often making headlines. The infamous Riverside Mystery, the Downtown Puzzle, cases that had seemed impossible until she and Rex cracked them together. As they walked, Jessica felt a slight dizziness creep in. She dismissed it as anxiety about her new life chapter, but Rex noticed immediately. He pressed closer to her side, his body language shifting from relaxed to concerned. Jessica patted his head reassuringly, though the sensation persisted. "I'm fine, buddy," she assured him, but Rex wasn't convinced. His training kicked in, and he gently guided her toward a nearby bench. Jessica sat down, grateful for his intuition. The world seemed to spin slightly, and she closed her eyes, waiting for the sensation to pass. A young jogger stopped nearby, concern etched on her face. "Are you all right, ma'am? Do you need help?" Jessica waved her off with a smile. "Just taking a breather, thank you." But Rex knew better. He whined softly, nudging her hand with his nose. In their years together, he had developed an almost supernatural ability to sense when something was wrong with her. Today, something was definitely off. Back home, Jessica tried to shake the uneasy feeling. She prepared dinner for both of them, maintaining their usual routine. Rex watched her every move from his spot in the kitchen, his eyes never leaving her. The evening news played in the background, but Jessica found it hard to focus. That night, as she prepared for bed, the dizziness returned stronger than before. Rex followed her to the bathroom, refusing to leave her side. In the mirror, Jessica noticed she looked paler than usual. Perhaps retirement was affecting her more than she'd anticipated. "We've faced tougher challenges, haven't we, boy?" she whispered to Rex, who responded with a gentle lick to her hand. Little did they know their greatest test was just beginning, one that would prove their bond was stronger than anyone could have imagined. As Jessica drifted off to sleep, Rex maintained his vigilant watch from his bed beside hers. In the quiet darkness, their breathing synchronized, a habit formed from countless nights on patrol together. Outside, Chicago continued its endless dance of lights and shadows, but within these walls, a story of extraordinary loyalty was about to unfold, one that would challenge everything they thought they knew about the connection between humans and their four-legged companions. The next few days brought little improvement to Jessica's condition. Her morning routine, once energetic and purposeful, became a struggle against an invisible force that seemed to drain her strength. Rex adapted to this new reality with remarkable intuition, staying closer than ever, his behavioral changes subtle but significant. One morning, as Jessica attempted to prepare breakfast, her hands trembled while reaching for a coffee mug. Rex's immediate reaction was to position himself behind her, providing support as she steadied herself against the counter. The incident left her shaken, not just physically, but emotionally. This wasn't the retirement she had envisioned. "Maybe I'm just adjusting to the quiet life," she told herself, but Rex's concerned whimpers suggested otherwise. Her faithful companion had become increasingly protective, refusing to leave her side even for moments, exhibiting behavior reminiscent of their most challenging cases together. Sarah, Jessica's daughter, noticed the change during her weekly visit. A nurse at Chicago General Hospital, she inherited her mother's keen eye for detail and immediate concern for others. As they sat in the living room, Sarah couldn't help but observe how Rex positioned himself strategically between them, ready to assist Jessica at any moment. "Mom, you don't look well," Sarah said directly, her professional instincts kicking in. "Have you seen a doctor?" Jessica attempted to deflect her daughter's concern with a wave of her hand. "It's nothing, sweetheart. Just retirement blues, I suppose. Everyone goes through this adjustment period." But Sarah wasn't convinced. She noticed how her mother's hands shook slightly as she lifted her teacup, how her normally straight posture seemed to waver. Even more telling was Rex's behavior. The German Shepherd's eyes never left Jessica, his ears constantly alert to her every movement. "Rex knows something's wrong too," Sarah pressed, gesturing to the vigilant dog. "He's acting just like he did during your dangerous cases, except now the threat isn't external. It's something else." Jessica sighed, finally allowing her facade to crack slightly. "I've been feeling different. Dizzy spells, weakness. I thought it would pass, but it hasn't," Sarah finished, her medical training already forming possible diagnoses. "Mom, you need to get checked out. Promise me you'll make an appointment tomorrow." Before Jessica could respond, Rex stood suddenly, pressing his body against her legs as another wave of dizziness hit. This time, it was accompanied by a strange numbness in her left arm. Sarah immediately moved to her mother's side, her professional demeanor mixing with daughterly concern. That evening, after Sarah left, Jessica sat in her favorite armchair, looking through old photographs. Images of her and Rex during their active duty days brought both comfort and melancholy. There they were at the police academy graduation, Rex sitting proudly beside her. Another showed them receiving a commendation for outstanding service. Rex lay at her feet, occasionally lifting his head to check on her. His training had taught him to detect the subtlest changes in human behavior, and now those skills were focused entirely on Jessica. Every slight waver in her breathing, every minor shift in her posture drew his immediate attention. The next morning, Jessica woke to find Rex had moved from his usual sleeping spot to position himself right next to her bed. His brown eyes met hers with an intensity that spoke volumes. She reached out to pat his head, and he gently took her hand in his mouth, a gesture he rarely made anymore, but one that had special meaning between them. "Okay, boy," she whispered. "You win. We'll get this checked out." Making the doctor's appointment felt like admitting defeat, but Rex's constant vigilance had convinced her. As she dialed the number, her faithful companion sat beside her, his tail wagging slightly, as if approving of her decision. The receptionist scheduled her for later that week, and Jessica felt a mix of relief and apprehension. Throughout the day, memories of their time on the force kept surfacing. How Rex had always sensed danger before it became apparent, how his instincts had never failed them. Now those same instincts were telling both of them that something wasn't right, and Jessica couldn't ignore the signs anymore. That afternoon, during their walk in the park, Jessica noticed how Rex had modified his behavior. Instead of running ahead to explore as he usually did, he matched her slower pace perfectly. When they passed other dogs, he remained focused solely on her, his training overriding any natural canine curiosity. As the sun began to set over Lake Michigan, casting long shadows across their path, Jessica realized that their greatest challenge might not be fighting crime or solving cases, but facing whatever lay ahead together. The bond they had forged through years of partnership was about to be tested in ways neither of them could have anticipated. The waiting room at Chicago Medical Center felt sterile and impersonal, a stark contrast to the warm connection between Jessica and Rex. Through special permission, granted due to her years of service to the city, Rex was allowed to accompany her to the appointment. He sat perfectly still beside her chair, his presence providing comfort in the awkward silence. Other patients couldn't help but stare at the impressive German Shepherd, his professional demeanor evident even in these civilian surroundings. A young girl across the room smiled and pointed, whispering to her mother about the police dog. Jessica managed a weak smile in return, her hand automatically finding its way to Rex's fur. "Jessica Hall." The nurse's voice cut through the quiet. Rex immediately stood, ready to follow. The nurse, noticing their unique dynamic, smiled warmly. "Your four-legged friend can come too. Dr. Anderson's been briefed about your situation." The examination began routinely enough. Blood pressure, temperature, basic reflexes. But as Dr. Anderson asked more detailed questions about her symptoms, Jessica found herself struggling to maintain her composure. Rex pressed closer to her leg, offering silent support. "How long have you been experiencing these dizzy spells?" Dr. Anderson asked, his pen hovering over his notepad. "About 2 weeks," Jessica replied, then glanced at Rex. "Though I think he noticed something was wrong before I did." Dr. Anderson's interest piqued. "Your daughter mentioned something similar? Tell me more about that." Jessica described Rex's behavioral changes, his increased protectiveness, his unusual sleeping habits. The doctor listened intently, occasionally glancing at the German Shepherd, who remained focused solely on his partner. "Animals often sense things before we do, Doctor," Anderson noted. "I'd like to run some tests, blood work, MRI, a few other things. Given your symptoms and their progression, I want to be thorough." The next few hours blurred into a series of examinations. Through each one, Rex remained as close as regulations would allow. During the MRI, he had to wait outside, but his whines could be heard even through the machine's loud humming. Sarah arrived during the final blood draw, still wearing her nurse's scrubs from her shift. She took one look at her mother's pale face and Rex's protective stance, and knew this was more serious than simple retirement adjustment. "The results should be ready in a few days," Dr. Anderson explained as they prepared to leave. "In the meantime, I want you to take it easy. No strenuous activities, and please don't hesitate to come back if your symptoms worsen." The drive home was quiet, with Sarah at the wheel and Rex in the back seat, his head resting near Jessica's shoulder. The setting sun painted Chicago's skyline in deep oranges and purples, a beautiful sight that usually brought Jessica peace, but now seemed to carry an ominous weight. "You can stay with me tonight," Sarah offered, breaking the silence. Jessica shook her head. "I'll be fine at home, besides Rex is with me." That evening, as Jessica settled into her favorite chair, she found herself reflecting on the strange turns life could take. Just weeks ago, her biggest concern had been adjusting to retirement. Now uncertainty loomed like a shadow over her future. Rex brought her his favorite toy, a worn tennis ball they used during training exercises. It was his way of trying to maintain normalcy, to bring comfort through familiar routines. Jessica held the ball but didn't throw it, and Rex seemed to understand, settling instead at her feet. The night brought fitful sleep, interrupted by moments of discomfort and anxiety. Each time Jessica stirred, she found Rex alert and watching, his devotion unwavering. In the quiet hours before dawn, she reached down to stroke his fur, drawing strength from his steady presence. Morning arrived with a new challenge, a stronger wave of dizziness that made even simple tasks difficult. Rex stayed so close that Jessica could feel his warmth against her leg as she moved carefully through her morning routine. When she almost stumbled in the kitchen, his strong body was there instantly, providing support. Sarah called mid-morning, her voice carrying forced cheerfulness. "The lab is rushing your results," she said. "Dr. Anderson put a priority on them." "That's good," Jessica replied, trying to match her daughter's tone while Rex watched her intently. "Though I'm sure it's nothing serious." But the look in Rex's eyes told a different story. His gaze held the same intensity it had shown during their most challenging cases, when danger lurked just around the corner. This time, though, the threat wasn't something they could chase down or overcome through tactical training. As the day progressed, Jessica found herself drawn to the photo albums again, particularly the images from their early days together. Rex's training period, their first successful mission, countless moments that had shaped their partnership into something extraordinary. Each photograph told a story of trust, loyalty, and an unspoken understanding that transcended ordinary human-animal relationships. The call came 3 days later. Jessica was in her garden, Rex maintaining his now constant vigil beside her, when her phone buzzed with Dr. Anderson's number. Her hands trembled slightly as she answered, and Rex immediately pressed closer. His ears perked forward, as if he too was listening for news. "Miss Hall, could you come in this afternoon? We have your results, and I'd prefer to discuss them in person." Dr. Anderson's voice carried a professional neutrality that did little to ease Jessica's growing anxiety. Sarah insisted on accompanying them to the hospital. The drive was thick with unspoken concerns, broken only by Rex's occasional reassuring whimpers from the back seat. The German Shepherd's training had taught him to remain calm in tense situations, but his deep connection with Jessica made him unusually restless. Dr. Anderson's office felt smaller than Jessica remembered. Rex positioned himself between her chair and the door, a habit from their police days when he would guard potential exits. Sarah sat on her mother's other side, unconsciously mirroring Rex's protective stance. "The tests revealed some concerning results," Dr. Anderson began, spreading several images across his desk. "We've found evidence of a neurological condition that requires immediate attention." As the doctor explained the diagnosis and proposed treatment plan, Jessica found herself focusing on Rex's steady presence, rather than the medical terminology that seemed to float around her. The word aggressive treatment stood out, along with specialized facility and immediate admission. Sarah, with her medical background, asked detailed questions, while Jessica sat in stunned silence. Rex, sensing her distress, placed his head gently in her lap, his brown eyes never leaving her face. The simple gesture brought tears to her eyes, tears she had been holding back since the first symptoms appeared. "The good news, Dr. Anderson continued, his voice softening, is that we caught this relatively early. The treatment protocol has shown promising results in similar cases. However, you'll need to begin treatment as soon as possible." The reality of immediate hospitalization hit Jessica hard. Her first thought wasn't about herself, but about Rex. "What about my dog?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Anderson glanced at Rex, noting the exceptional bond between them. "Normally we don't allow animals in the treatment facility, but given your unique circumstances and Rex's background as a service animal, we might be able to make some arrangements for supervised visits." Sarah squeezed her mother's hand. "Rex can stay with me when he's not visiting. My apartment allows pets and he knows me well." The next few hours passed in a blur of paperwork and preparations. Jessica was admitted to the hospital's neurological ward, a place that felt worlds away from the streets she and Rex had once patrolled. The staff worked efficiently to settle her in, but there was an underlying sadness in watching Rex resist leaving her side. "He needs to go with Sarah now, boy," Jessica explained softly to Rex, who sat stoically beside her hospital bed. His training battled with his instincts, the need to follow commands versus his deep-rooted desire to protect his partner. Sarah gently took Rex's leash, but he remained motionless, his eyes fixed on Jessica. A nurse passing by paused to watch the scene, touched by the obvious connection between the former detective and her canine partner. "It's okay," Jessica assured him, her voice breaking slightly. "I'll see you soon." Rex finally allowed Sarah to lead him away, but he kept looking back until they turned the corner. The moment they disappeared, Jessica felt an emptiness she hadn't experienced since before their partnership began. The hospital room, despite its modern equipment and comfortable furnishings, felt cold and foreign without Rex's reassuring presence. That evening, as Jessica lay in her hospital bed, she could hear the usual sounds of a busy medical facility: nurses chatting, equipment beeping, the squeak of cartwheels on linoleum floors. But all she could think about was Rex, wondering if he was as unsettled by their separation as she was. Sarah sent a photo of Rex at her apartment, showing him lying next to Jessica's old police jacket, which they'd brought along for comfort. The image brought fresh tears to Jessica's eyes. Even apart, their connection remained unbroken, a testament to years of trust and shared experiences. As night fell over Chicago, both Jessica and Rex faced their first evening apart in years. In Sarah's apartment, Rex maintained his vigilant watch, this time directed at the door, as if expecting Jessica to walk through it at any moment. Meanwhile, in her hospital room, Jessica clutched her phone with the photo of Rex, drawing strength from their bond as she prepared to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The first week of treatment tested Jessica's resolve in ways her years on the force never had. The hospital routine felt foreign and constraining, so different from her active life with Rex. The medical staff, though kind and professional, couldn't fill the void left by her faithful companion's absence. Sarah had arranged for Rex to visit 3 times that week, working with the hospital administration to establish a precedent for these unusual circumstances. The first visit was scheduled for Wednesday afternoon, and Jessica found herself counting the hours, much like she used to count down to the end of a long stakeout. When Rex finally padded into her hospital room, his reaction surprised even the experienced medical staff. Instead of rushing to Jessica's bedside, he first carefully surveyed the room, checking each corner and equipment piece, a holdover from his police training. Only then did he approach her, his movements gentle and deliberate. "Hey, partner," Jessica whispered, reaching out to touch his familiar fur. Rex placed his head on the edge of her bed, his eyes showing an understanding that transcended human communication. The nurses paused in their rounds, touched by the scene unfolding before them. Dr. Anderson, passing by during his rounds, stopped to observe their interaction. He noticed something remarkable. Jessica's vital signs, displayed on the nearby monitor, showed marked improvement in Rex's presence. Her heart rate stabilized, her blood pressure lowered to optimal levels, and even her oxygen saturation improved. "This is fascinating," he commented, making notes in her chart. "The physiological response to Rex's presence is significant. We might need to reconsider our visiting policies." Sarah, who had accompanied Rex, shared her own observations. "He's been different at home too. He keeps bringing Mum's things to my room. Her old sweater, her shoes. It's like he's trying to keep her presence alive in the apartment." The visit lasted an hour, though it felt like mere minutes to Jessica. When it was time for Rex to leave, he seemed to understand the necessity, but his reluctance was evident in every step. At the doorway, he turned back one last time, his eyes conveying a promise to return. That night, Jessica felt stronger than she had in days. The memory of Rex's visit carried her through the discomfort of her evening treatments. The nurses noticed her improved spirits, with one commenting that she seemed to have a new light in her eyes. Between visits, Sarah kept Jessica updated with daily photos and videos of Rex. One particular video showed him sitting by the window of Sarah's apartment, watching the street below with the same alertness he once showed during their patrols. Another captured him sleeping next to Jessica's old police uniform, which Sarah had brought from home. The hospital staff began to take special interest in Rex's visits, noting the positive impact on Jessica's recovery. Young patients in the pediatric ward would peek into her room when Rex was there, their faces lighting up at the sight of the distinguished German Shepherd. Some of the other patients began timing their walks to coincide with Rex's visits, drawn to the obvious bond between the former detective and her K9 partner. During one visit, a young resident doing his rounds stopped to watch Rex gently nuzzling Jessica's hand as she received her treatment. "I've read about animal-assisted therapy," he mentioned to Dr. Anderson, "but this seems different." "It is different," Dr. Anderson replied, observing how Rex anticipated Jessica's needs, shifting his position slightly whenever she showed the slightest discomfort. "This isn't just therapy, this is a partnership." The hospital's physical therapy team began incorporating Rex into Jessica's recovery plan. During his visits, they would encourage her to walk the corridor with Rex by her side. His presence provided both physical and emotional support, his strong body always ready to steady her if needed. One afternoon, as Jessica sat in the hospital's small garden area with Rex during his visit, she noticed a change in his behavior. He seemed more alert, more focused on her movements than usual. When she felt a slight tremor in her hand, Rex had already positioned himself closer, providing support before she even realized she needed it. Sarah, watching from nearby, couldn't help but marvel at their connection. "It's like he knows what's happening inside your body before the machines do," she observed. "Maybe we should put him in charge of your medical care." The comment brought a genuine smile to Jessica's face, the first in days. As the sun filtered through the garden's trees, casting dappled shadows around them, she realized that while the hospital's advanced medical equipment could monitor her vital signs, Rex could sense something deeper, something that no machine could detect. As Jessica's treatment progressed into its second week, the hospital staff began noticing peculiar patterns. On days when Rex visited, her vital signs were remarkably stable, her response to treatment notably improved. During his absence, the medical readings would subtly decline, as if her body was somehow attuned to his presence. Dr. Anderson found himself increasingly intrigued by this phenomenon. After consulting with his colleagues, he decided to expand Rex's visiting hours, turning what had been brief visits into longer therapeutic sessions. The decision marked a significant shift in Jessica's treatment protocol. "There's something here we don't fully understand," he explained to Sarah during one of their consultations. "The connection between your mother and Rex goes beyond emotional support. It's affecting her physiological responses in ways we hadn't anticipated." During one particularly challenging afternoon, when Jessica's strength seemed to waver, Rex's behavior caught everyone's attention. He suddenly became extremely alert, his ears perked forward, his body tense. Moments later, the monitors detected a slight irregularity in Jessica's heart rhythm, something Rex had somehow sensed before the sophisticated medical equipment could detect it. The nursing staff began documenting these incidents, creating a detailed log of Rex's reactions and their correlation to Jessica's condition. Some of the more experienced nurses had seen therapy dogs in action before, but this was different. Rex wasn't just providing comfort, he was actively participating in Jessica's recovery process. "It's like having an extra monitor," one nurse commented to her colleagues, "one that doesn't need batteries or calibration." Sarah had been researching similar cases, spending her free time in the hospital's medical library. She discovered studies about the extraordinary abilities of trained service dogs, but none quite matched the unique bond between her mother and Rex. Their connection, forged through years of police work and mutual trust, seemed to operate on a different level entirely. One morning, during what had become their routine garden visits, Jessica noticed Rex's attention fixed on another patient, an elderly man struggling with his walker. Before anyone could react, Rex gently guided Jessica toward the man, positioning himself so he could support both of them. The man, startled at first, soon found himself smiling at the unexpected assistance. "He was my partner on the force," Jessica explained to the grateful man, her voice carrying a hint of pride. Old habits die hard. The incident sparked interest among the hospital's rehabilitation team. They began incorporating Rex into their work with other patients, discovering that his presence had a calming effect on many of them. Children especially responded to him, their fear of hospital procedures diminishing when the distinguished German Shepherd was nearby. But Rex never lost focus on his primary mission, Jessica's recovery. During their sessions together, he would position himself differently depending on her needs, sometimes providing physical support, other times simply laying his head on her lap, his steady presence anchoring her through difficult moments. Sarah observed these interactions with growing amazement. "Remember when you first brought Rex home from the academy?" she asked her mother one afternoon. "Dad said it was like you'd brought home another person, not just a dog." Jessica smiled at the memory. Her late husband had quickly recognized the exceptional nature of her partnership with Rex, often joking that the German Shepherd understood her better than he did. Now watching Rex navigate the complex environment of the hospital with the same intelligence and dedication he'd shown on the streets, she realized how right her husband had been. The medical staff began adjusting their schedules around Rex's visits, recognizing that certain procedures went more smoothly when he was present. Even the most skeptical doctors couldn't deny the positive impact his presence had on Jessica's recovery process. During one particularly meaningful moment, as Jessica worked through her physical therapy exercises, Rex demonstrated an uncanny ability to anticipate her needs. When she showed signs of fatigue, before any of the human observers noticed, he would shift position, offering support exactly where and when she needed it. The physical therapist, watching this synchronized dance of support, shook her head in amazement. "In all my years of practice," she remarked, "I've never seen anything quite like this. It's as if you two share a language that the rest of us can't quite understand." As the sun set on another day of treatment, casting long shadows through the hospital windows, Jessica reflected on the strange twists of fate that had brought them to this point. What had started as a professional partnership years ago had evolved into something science struggled to explain, a connection that now seemed to be playing a crucial role in her fight for recovery. The hospital's research department had begun taking a special interest in Jessica and Rex's case. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a specialist in behavioral medicine, started documenting their interactions, fascinated by the unprecedented nature of their bond. She set up cameras in Jessica's room, hoping to capture and analyze the subtle communications between the former detective and her canine partner. "There's something remarkable here," Dr. Rodriguez explained during a staff meeting. "The dog's ability to anticipate physiological changes before our equipment detects them suggests a level of awareness we've never documented before." Meanwhile, Jessica's condition had reached a critical phase in treatment. The medical team had warned that this period would be challenging, but no one had anticipated how Rex would respond to these new developments. During his visits, his behavior became even more focused, almost as if he could sense the increased stakes. One particular afternoon stood out in the medical staff's observations. Jessica was experiencing severe side effects from her treatment, her vital signs fluctuating dangerously. Before any alarm sounded, Rex suddenly stood at attention, his entire body rigid with concern. Seconds later, the monitors confirmed what he had already sensed. Jessica's blood pressure was dropping rapidly. "Get Dr. Anderson," called out one of the nurses, but Rex was already positioning himself beside Jessica's bed, his body providing support as she experienced a wave of dizziness. The medical team arrived to find Rex already actively participating in stabilizing his partner. Sarah, who had been watching from the doorway, felt tears welling up in her eyes. "It's like watching their old police work," she whispered to Dr. Rodriguez. "They always moved as one unit, anticipating each other's needs without a word." The incident prompted Dr. Anderson to call a special consultation with several colleagues from other departments. They gathered in the conference room, reviewing footage of Rex's interactions with Jessica, particularly during critical moments. The evidence was compelling. Rex's behavior consistently predicted medical events before they registered on the hospital's sophisticated equipment. "What we're seeing here challenges our understanding of human-animal bonds," Dr. Anderson admitted to the assembled team. "This goes beyond standard therapeutic benefits. Their connection appears to operate on a physiological level we can't fully explain." Back in Jessica's room, Rex had taken to performing what the nurses called his rounds. He would systematically check various aspects of Jessica's condition, her breathing, her temperature, her overall comfort level, adjusting his position and attention accordingly. His military-grade training, combined with their years of partnership, had created a unique form of medical vigilance. One young resident, fascinated by their dynamic, began keeping a separate log of Rex's behavioral changes and their correlation to Jessica's medical readings. The patterns were undeniable. Rex's reactions consistently preceded measurable changes in Jessica's condition by several minutes. "It's like having an early warning system," the resident commented to Dr. Rodriguez, "one that operates on instinct rather than electronics." The news of their extraordinary connection began spreading through the hospital's departments. Medical students started requesting rotations on Jessica's floor, eager to witness firsthand the remarkable partnership between the former detective and her canine companion. During physical therapy sessions, the staff noticed that Rex had developed a subtle system of signals. A specific tilt of his head would indicate when Jessica needed to rest, while a gentle nudge meant she could push a little harder. The physical therapists learned to trust these cues, incorporating them into their treatment protocols. "They've developed their own language," observed the lead therapist, "one based on years of trust and shared experiences. We're just beginning to understand its complexity." Sarah spent hours researching similar cases in medical literature, but found nothing that quite matched what she was witnessing. The closest parallels came from studies of military and police K9 units, where dogs and handlers developed deep psychological bonds. But this was different. This was a connection that seemed to transcend normal biological understanding. As evening approached, Jessica lay in her hospital bed, Rex maintaining his usual protective position beside her. The soft beeping of monitors provided a steady backdrop to their shared vigilance. Outside her room, doctors continued to debate the science behind their connection, but within these walls, something deeper and more profound was at work. The morning began like any other in room 407 of Chicago General's Specialized Care Unit, but Rex's behavior suggested something was different. His usual calm vigilance had been replaced by an unusual restlessness. The medical staff, now attuned to his signals, took notice immediately. Dr. Anderson had just begun his morning rounds when he observed Rex's changed demeanor. The German Shepherd kept shifting his position around Jessica's bed, occasionally letting out soft whimpers, a behavior he rarely displayed. Sarah, who had arrived early that morning, recognized the signs from their days on the force. He used to act like this right before something big would happen during an investigation, she explained to Dr. Anderson. It was his way of alerting Mom to incoming danger. The medical team responded by increasing their monitoring of Jessica's vital signs, though all readings appeared normal. Dr. Rodriguez, who had been documenting their interactions, set up additional recording equipment, sensing that something significant was about to unfold. By mid-morning, Jessica began showing subtle signs of distress that only Rex had anticipated. Her oxygen levels started fluctuating, and her heart rate became erratic. The medical staff rushed to respond, but Rex was already in position, providing support in ways that seemed almost choreographed. "Look at how he's positioned himself," Dr. Rodriguez pointed out to her colleagues. "He's not just offering comfort, he's actively supporting her body in the most optimal position for breathing." The next few hours became a delicate dance between medical science and instinct. While the doctors worked to stabilize Jessica's condition, Rex remained an integral part of the process. His reactions guided the medical team's responses, his behavior providing crucial early warnings of changes in her condition. Sarah watched from the corner of the room, amazed at how the hospital staff had learned to work in harmony with Rex. Gone were the initial skepticism and raised eyebrows. Now even the most experienced nurses would glance at Rex before checking their monitors, trusting his instincts as much as their equipment. During one particularly tense moment, when Jessica's vitals suddenly dropped, Rex's response was extraordinary. Instead of becoming agitated, he calmly pressed his body against her side, maintaining constant contact while the medical team worked. His steady presence seemed to have a stabilizing effect on her readings. "This is remarkable," Dr. Anderson murmured, watching the monitors slowly return to normal. "The physiological response to his presence is unlike anything I've seen in my career." As afternoon approached, Dr. Rodriguez noticed something intriguing in her recordings. Every time Jessica's vital signs showed the slightest irregularity, Rex had adjusted his position exactly 47 seconds before the changes registered on the monitors. The pattern was consistent and undeniable. "He's not just reacting to her condition," Dr. Rodriguez explained to her team. "He's anticipating it with incredible precision. This goes beyond trained behavior or simple empathy." The hospital's research department became increasingly interested in documenting this phenomenon. Medical students began rotating through in small groups, observing the unique partnership between patient and companion. Many left the room shaking their heads in amazement, their textbook understanding of patient care challenged by what they witnessed. Late in the afternoon, when Jessica's condition finally stabilized, the medical team gathered for their daily conference. The discussion centered around the day's events and the undeniable role Rex had played in managing the crisis. "We need to reconsider our approach to this case," Dr. Anderson announced to his colleagues. "What we're witnessing here isn't just a happy coincidence or a feel-good story about a pet helping their owner. This is something that could potentially change our understanding of patient care." As evening settled over the hospital, Sarah sat beside her mother's bed, watching Rex maintain his protective vigil. The events of the day had left everyone exhausted, but Rex remained alert, his dedication unwavering. In the dim light of the hospital room, the bond between the former detective and her K9 partner seemed to take on an almost tangible quality. The hospital's research wing had become a hub of activity, with Dr. Rodriguez and her team poring over hours of footage documenting Rex's interactions with Jessica. Their findings were beginning to challenge established medical paradigms about patient care and recovery. "Look at this pattern, Dr. Rodriguez pointed out during a presentation to the hospital board. She displayed a series of charts showing the correlation between Rex's behavior and Jessica's vital signs. The dog's responses precede medical events with such consistency that it defies statistical probability. Meanwhile, in Jessica's room, a new dynamic was emerging. The medical staff had begun integrating Rex's signals into their standard protocols. When he shifted position in a certain way, they knew to check specific vital signs. When he made particular sounds, they prepared for potential changes in Jessica's condition. "It's like having an advanced early warning system," one nurse explained to a group of medical students. "But instead of complex algorithms, we're working with pure instinct and a connection we're only beginning to understand." Sarah had taken to documenting everything in a journal, creating detailed notes about Rex's behaviors and their correlations to her mother's condition. Her medical training helped her bridge the gap between scientific observation and the inexplicable bond she witnessed daily. One morning, during what seemed like a routine checkup, Rex's behavior caught everyone's attention. He suddenly became extremely alert, his ears forward, his body tense. The monitors showed no immediate cause for concern, but the staff had learned to trust his instincts. "Run a complete panel," Dr. Anderson ordered, noting Rex's reaction. Within hours, the results revealed a subtle chemical imbalance that could have developed into a serious complication if left undetected. Rex had sensed it before any medical test could identify it. The discovery prompted Dr. Rodriguez to expand her research. She began investigating other cases of service animals in medical settings, but nothing compared to the level of awareness and anticipation that Rex displayed. His connection with Jessica seemed to operate on a frequency that science couldn't fully measure. "We're dealing with something unprecedented," she explained to her colleagues. "This isn't just about emotional support or trained responses. There's a level of biological synchronization here that we've never seen before." As word of their case spread through medical circles, other hospitals began reaching out, interested in studying this unique partnership. But Dr. Anderson remained protective of his patient and her remarkable companion, understanding that their bond was more than just a scientific curiosity. During physical therapy sessions, the staff noticed that Rex had developed an almost choreographed routine with Jessica. He knew exactly when to provide support, when to encourage movement, and when to signal for rest. His timing was impeccable, often anticipating Jessica's needs before she herself was aware of them. "It's like watching a dance," the physical therapist remarked. "Every move is perfectly coordinated, but none of it is rehearsed. It's pure intuition." In the quieter moments when the medical teams weren't running tests or collecting data, Sarah would watch her mother and Rex together. She noticed how their breathing would synchronize, how Rex's heartbeat would adjust to match Jessica's rhythm. These subtle harmonies spoke of a connection that went beyond ordinary understanding. The hospital's behavioral science department had begun developing new protocols based on their observations. They were learning to read the subtle signs that Rex displayed, creating a new language of patient care that combined traditional medical knowledge with intuitive understanding. Late one evening, as the hospital settled into its night routine, Dr. Rodriguez sat in her office reviewing the day's data. The evidence was mounting that Rex's presence was more than therapeutic. It was becoming an integral part of Jessica's recovery process. His ability to detect and respond to changes in her condition was proving to be as reliable as any medical equipment, and in some cases, even more so. As she looked through her office window toward Jessica's room, she could see Rex maintaining his usual vigil. In the soft glow of the nightlights, their connection seemed to transcend the physical space between them, creating an invisible bridge that science was only beginning to comprehend. The monitors in Jessica's room began showing concerning patterns early that morning. Her vital signs, which had been relatively stable for days, started fluctuating in unpredictable ways. Rex's behavior shifted dramatically even before the first alarm sounded. "Something's different this time," Sarah whispered to Dr. Anderson as they watched Rex pace anxiously around Jessica's bed. His movements were precise and purposeful, unlike his usual protective positioning. Every few seconds he would return to Jessica's side, pressing his body against her with gentle insistence. Dr. Rodriguez, who had arrived early to continue her observations, noticed something unusual in Rex's behavior pattern. "He's not just reacting to her current condition," she noted, studying her monitoring equipment. "It's almost as if he's preparing for something." The medical team had learned to trust these signals implicitly. Within minutes, additional staff were called in, and emergency protocols were initiated. Jessica's condition began deteriorating rapidly, confirming Rex's premonition. "Her numbers are dropping," a nurse called out, but Rex was already responding. He had positioned himself in a way that seemed to anticipate the medical team's needs, leaving space for them to work while maintaining constant contact with Jessica. Sarah watched in amazement as her mother's loyal partner seamlessly integrated himself into the emergency response. When the medical team needed to turn Jessica, Rex adjusted his position to provide support. When they needed access to medical equipment, he shifted without being asked, always maintaining his protective presence. Dr. Anderson, coordinating the response, found himself relying on Rex's reactions to guide some of his decisions. The German Shepherd's behavior had become a crucial indicator, offering insights that even the most sophisticated medical equipment couldn't provide. "Watch his ears," Dr. Rodriguez instructed a group of residents who had gathered to observe. "The angle changes precisely 43 seconds before any variation in her vital signs. It's like he's reading a signal we can't detect." As the crisis intensified, the bond between Jessica and Rex became even more apparent. Despite her deteriorating condition, her vital signs would momentarily stabilize whenever Rex made direct contact. The medical team began working around this phenomenon, coordinating their interventions with Rex's movements. "It's remarkable," Dr. Anderson commented during a brief pause in treatment. "He's not just providing comfort, he's actively participating in her medical care. I've never seen anything like it." Sarah, torn between her professional understanding as a nurse and her emotional connection as a daughter, found herself drawing strength from Rex's unwavering focus. His certainty, his absolute dedication to her mother's well-being, provided hope when the medical readings offered little comfort. Throughout the day, as various specialists came and went, Rex maintained his vigilant presence. He seemed to know exactly what each doctor or nurse needed before they asked, shifting position to accommodate different procedures while never breaking his essential connection with Jessica. Dr. Rodriguez's monitoring equipment captured every detail of their interaction. The data showed an almost supernatural synchronization between Rex's behavior and Jessica's physiological responses. Every time her condition threatened to worsen, Rex would adjust his position or change his physical contact in ways that seemed to help stabilize her. As evening approached, the immediate crisis began to subside. The medical team had managed to stabilize Jessica's condition, but everyone in the room knew that Rex had played a crucial role in the outcome. His early warning and constant support had given them precious minutes to respond. "We need to document this, Doctor," Rodriguez insisted, reviewing her recordings. "What we witnessed today goes beyond any established understanding of animal-assisted therapy. This was something entirely different." In the quiet that followed the day's events, Sarah sat beside her mother's bed, watching Rex maintain his protective position. His eyes never left Jessica's face, his body remaining in perfect alignment with hers. The connection between them seemed to operate on a level that transcended physical understanding. The days following the crisis brought new revelations that left the medical team questioning everything they thought they knew about patient care. Dr. Rodriguez's latest analysis of the data collected during the critical incident revealed patterns that defied conventional medical understanding. "Look at these readings," she explained to a captivated group of specialists gathered in the hospital's conference room. Every time Rex adjusted his position, there was a corresponding change in Jessica's neural activity. It's as if they're operating on the same frequency. The hospital's neurology department had become particularly interested in these findings. They brought in specialized equipment to monitor both Jessica's brain activity and Rex's behavioral responses simultaneously. What they discovered was extraordinary. There's a measurable synchronization in their brainwave patterns, Dr. Chen, the lead neurologist, explained while reviewing the results. When Rex senses something's about to change in Jessica's condition, his brain activity shifts first, followed by corresponding changes in her neural patterns. Sarah spent hours talking with the various specialists, trying to understand the implications of these discoveries. As both a nurse and Jessica's daughter, she found herself bridging the gap between scientific observation and emotional understanding. Mom and Rex always had this special connection during their police work, she explained to Dr. Rodriguez, but this is different. It's like their bond has evolved into something deeper, something we're only beginning to comprehend. In Jessica's room, the routine had shifted to accommodate the new monitoring equipment. Rex, ever adaptable, had learned to work around the additional wires and sensors while maintaining his protective vigil. His behavior continued to provide invaluable insights into Jessica's condition. One afternoon, during what seemed like a routine checkup, Rex's sudden change in behavior caught everyone's attention. Instead of his usual alert posture, he became extraordinarily calm, almost serene. The medical team, initially concerned, soon noticed a corresponding improvement in Jessica's readings. "It's as if he knows something we don't," one of the nurses whispered to Sarah. "Like he can see her recovery path before our instruments can detect it." Dr. Anderson had begun incorporating Rex's behavior into his treatment decisions. When considering medication adjustments or therapy changes, he would carefully observe Rex's reactions. The German Shepherd's responses had proven more reliable than many traditional indicators. "We're witnessing the emergence of a new form of medical intuition," he explained to his colleagues. "One that combines ancient animal instincts with modern medical science in ways we never imagined possible." The research team had started documenting every subtle interaction between Jessica and Rex. They noticed that even during periods of apparent rest, there was a constant exchange of energy between them. Rex would adjust his breathing to match Jessica's, and her vital signs would often stabilize in response to his presence. Dr. Rodriguez's latest paper on their case was generating significant interest in the medical community. Hospitals across the country were reaching out, eager to learn more about this unprecedented partnership between patient and companion. "What we're seeing here could revolutionize our approach to patient care," she explained during a video conference with international colleagues. "It's not just about the presence of an animal companion, it's about recognizing and nurturing these deep biological connections." Sarah had begun keeping a detailed journal of her observations, noting patterns that even the sophisticated monitoring equipment couldn't capture. She documented the subtle changes in Rex's ear positions, the different tones in his whimpers, and the various ways he positioned himself around Jessica's bed. Late one evening, as the hospital settled into its night routine, something remarkable occurred. The neural monitoring equipment picked up a surge of synchronized activity between Jessica and Rex, even though both appeared to be sleeping. It was as if their minds were communicating on a level beyond conscious awareness. The morning light filtered through the hospital windows, casting gentle shadows across Jessica's room as Dr. Anderson reviewed the latest round of test results. The numbers told a story that even the most experienced medical professionals found difficult to explain. "Her neural patterns have completely transformed," he explained to the assembled team. "It's as if Rex's presence is creating new pathways in her brain, facilitating healing in ways our traditional treatments couldn't achieve." Dr. Rodriguez had spent the night analyzing the data from their synchronized sleep activity. What she discovered left her questioning the boundaries between science and the inexplicable. "During these shared moments of consciousness," she explained, pointing to her charts, "their brainwaves align in perfect harmony. It's like they're sharing the same mental space, communicating in a language we can't comprehend." Sarah noticed subtle changes in her mother's condition that went beyond the medical readings. There was more color in her cheeks, more strength in her grip, and most notably more frequent moments of response to Rex's presence. "Yesterday, I saw her fingers move when Rex nuzzled her hand," Sarah shared with Dr. Anderson. "It wasn't just a reflex, it was deliberate, like she was trying to reach back to him." The physical therapy team had begun structuring their sessions around Rex's intuitive understanding of Jessica's capabilities. When he indicated she could push harder, they followed his lead. When he signaled for rest, they knew to pull back. He's not just supporting her recovery, the lead therapist observed. He's actively guiding it, sensing her limits and potential in ways our instruments can't measure. One particularly remarkable session caught everyone's attention. As Jessica worked through her exercises, Rex's behavior suddenly shifted. He moved to her right side, gently pressing against her in a way he hadn't before. Moments later, she displayed unexpected strength in that arm, achieving movement that had previously seemed impossible. It's like he's mapping her recovery, Dr. Chen noted, watching the interaction. Somehow he knows exactly where her strength is returning before we can detect it through conventional means. The hospital board had taken notice of these developments. What started as an unusual case study was evolving into something that could potentially revolutionize their approach to patient care. They began discussing the possibility of establishing a dedicated research unit focused on studying and replicating these remarkable human-animal connections. Dr. Rodriguez found herself working late into the nights, trying to document and understand every aspect of this extraordinary partnership. She had begun developing new protocols that incorporated animal intuition into traditional medical practices. What we're witnessing isn't just about Jessica and Rex, she explained during a staff meeting. It's about recognizing that healing can occur through channels we haven't yet learned to measure or understand. Sarah had noticed another intriguing pattern. During the quiet hours of the night, when the hospital's usual bustle subsided, Rex would often position himself in ways that seemed to create a protective energy field around Jessica. The monitoring equipment would record subtle but consistent improvements in her condition during these periods. The other patients on the floor had begun timing their walks to pass by Jessica's room, drawing inspiration from the visible bond between her and Rex. Many reported feeling a sense of peace and hope just from witnessing their connection. As the day drew to a close, Dr. Anderson sat in his office reviewing Jessica's latest progress reports. The improvements in her condition defied conventional medical expectations. Something profound was happening, something that challenged the boundaries between science and the inexplicable. Perhaps, he mused to Sarah, we're not just witnessing a recovery, we're seeing the emergence of a new understanding of healing itself. The first signs of dawn were just breaking over Chicago when something extraordinary happened in room 407. Rex, who had maintained his usual vigilant position through the night, suddenly raised his head, his ears perked forward with intense focus. The monitors began registering unprecedented activity in Jessica's neural patterns. Dr. Rodriguez, who had been reviewing overnight data in her office, rushed to the room when the readings caught her attention. What she witnessed would challenge everything the medical community thought they knew about recovery and consciousness. "Look at these patterns," she whispered to the night nurse, pointing to the neural activity display. "They're perfectly synchronized, but Jessica's readings are leading now, not following Rex's as they usually do." Sarah, who had fallen asleep in the bedside chair, woke to find Rex in an unusual position. Instead of his protective stance, he was sitting perfectly still, his eyes fixed on Jessica's face with an intensity that seemed to transcend physical boundaries. "Something's different," Sarah observed, her medical training and daughterly intuition both on high alert. "It's like they're having a conversation we can't hear." The morning shift arrived to find the room buzzing with an energy that even the most skeptical staff members could feel. Dr. Anderson, called in early due to the unusual readings, stood quietly observing the scene before him. "In 30 years of medical practice," he said softly, "I've never seen anything like this. It's as if they've established a connection that operates outside our understanding of consciousness." The neural monitoring equipment continued to record extraordinary patterns of activity. Jessica's brain waves showed signs of increased awareness, while Rex's readings displayed a level of cognitive engagement that the veterinary consultants had never seen in any animal. "It's almost as if they're sharing the same mental space," Dr. Chen explained to his colleagues. The boundaries between their consciousness seemed to have become permeable. Throughout the morning, the medical team watched in amazement as new patterns emerged. Jessica's vital signs began showing remarkable improvement, but more significantly, there were subtle signs of increased awareness. A finger twitch here, an eye movement there, each perfectly synchronized with Rex's responses. Dr. Rodriguez had begun documenting every detail of this extraordinary development. "We're not just witnessing a recovery," she explained to the research team. We're observing the emergence of a new form of consciousness, a shared awareness that transcends our current understanding of the mind. Sarah noticed that Rex's behavior had shifted in subtle but significant ways. His movements were more deliberate, more purposeful, as if he were actively participating in some unseen process of healing. The physical therapy team reported unusual progress during their morning session. Jessica's responses were stronger, more coordinated, and seemed to anticipate Rex's supportive movements before he made them. "It's like they're dancing together," the lead therapist observed, "but the dance is happening on a level we can barely perceive." By afternoon, word had spread through the hospital about the extraordinary developments in room 407. Medical students and specialists gathered quietly outside, watching through the window as history unfolded before them. Dr. Anderson spent hours reviewing the mounting evidence of this unprecedented connection. The data suggested something that went beyond the bounds of current medical science, a form of healing that operated through channels they were only beginning to understand. "We're standing on the edge of something revolutionary," he told his colleagues during an impromptu meeting. "This isn't just about recovery anymore. It's about understanding the true nature of consciousness and connection." As evening approached, the energy in the room remained charged with possibility. Rex maintained his focused vigil, but there was something different in his demeanor, a sense of anticipation that even the most hardened skeptics couldn't ignore. The monitors continued to tell their extraordinary story, recording patterns of neural activity that defied conventional explanation. Something profound was happening in room 407, something that would challenge the boundaries between science and miracle. The moment began in silence. It was just past midnight when the monitors in Jessica's room started displaying readings that defied all medical understanding. Rex, who had been maintaining his usual protective position, suddenly became completely still, his eyes fixed on Jessica with an intensity that made the night staff pause in their rounds. "Call Dr. Anderson," the head nurse whispered, her eyes fixed on the extraordinary neural activity patterns appearing on the screens. "And get Dr. Rodriguez here immediately." Sarah, who had refused to leave that evening following an unexplainable feeling of anticipation, watched as Rex slowly moved into a position she had never seen before. He placed his head gently against Jessica's hand, and the monitors erupted with synchronized activity. "The neural patterns," Dr. Rodriguez gasped as she rushed into the room, still pulling on her lab coat. "They're not just synchronized anymore, they're completely intertwined." "I've never seen anything like this." The room quickly filled with medical personnel, all drawn by the unprecedented readings. Dr. Anderson arrived moments later, his eyes widening as he took in the scene before him. "Look at their brainwave patterns," he said, pointing to the display. "It's as if they're operating on the same frequency, but at a level we've never observed before." Rex remained perfectly still, his connection with Jessica appearing to deepen with each passing moment. The monitors showed their neural activity growing stronger, more synchronized, creating patterns that seemed to dance across the screens. "It's like they're building a bridge," Dr. Rodriguez observed, her voice filled with wonder. "A bridge between consciousness that we never knew was possible." Sarah noticed something changing in her mother's face, a subtle shift in expression, a deepening of color in her cheeks. Rex's breathing had synchronized perfectly with Jessica's, creating a harmony that seemed to resonate through the room. The medical team watched in amazement as new patterns began emerging on the monitors. Jessica's neural activity was showing signs of increased awareness, while Rex's readings displayed levels of cognitive engagement that broke all previous records. "The barriers between them are dissolving," Dr. Chen whispered, his eyes fixed on the readings. "It's as if they're sharing the same mental space, the same consciousness." Suddenly, Rex lifted his head slightly, his ears moving forward in a way that the staff had learned to recognize as significant. The monitors recorded a surge of synchronized activity that lit up every screen in the room. Sarah leaned forward, her heart pounding as she noticed something extraordinary. Her mother's fingers were moving, not in the random patterns they had seen before, but with purpose and awareness. "Mom," she whispered, hardly daring to breathe. The room fell into complete silence as Jessica's eyes began to flutter. Rex remained perfectly still, his connection with her appearing stronger than ever. The monitors continued their dance of synchronized patterns, telling a story that science was only beginning to understand. Dr. Anderson moved closer to the bed, his years of medical experience providing no context for what he was witnessing. "This is beyond anything we've ever seen," he said softly. "We're watching something that changes everything we thought we knew about consciousness and recovery." The energy in the room seemed to pulse with possibility as Jessica's awareness continued to grow. Rex maintained his position, his presence serving as an anchor between worlds, bridging gaps that medicine had never been able to cross. Dr. Rodriguez's fingers flew across her tablet, documenting every moment of this extraordinary event. "What we're witnessing isn't just a medical breakthrough," she explained to the assembled team. "It's a fundamental shift in our understanding of connection and consciousness." The night stretched on, each moment bringing new revelations as Jessica and Rex remained locked in their extraordinary communion. The boundaries between human and animal consciousness seemed to blur, creating something entirely new and profound. Every person in the room knew they were witnessing something unprecedented, a moment that would challenge medical science's understanding of recovery, consciousness, and the depths of connection possible between beings. The dawn that broke over Chicago General Hospital that morning felt different from any other. The first rays of sunlight streaming through Jessica's window seemed to carry a special luminescence, as if nature itself was acknowledging the miraculous events that had unfolded during the night. Jessica's eyes were now fully open, her gaze clear and focused. Rex remained by her side, his posture relaxed but alert, as if he had successfully completed a mission only he had fully understood. The bond between them, already extraordinary, had transformed into something even more profound. "The neural patterns are stabilizing," Dr. Rodriguez announced, her voice filled with barely contained excitement as she studied the monitors. "But they're maintaining a level of synchronization I never thought possible between two different species." Sarah couldn't take her eyes off her mother, watching as Jessica's awareness continued to strengthen. Each movement, each gesture, seemed coordinated with Rex's subtle responses, as if they were still operating on a shared frequency that transcended physical boundaries. "Hi, sweetheart," Jessica whispered to her daughter, her voice weak but clear. Her hand found Rex's fur, and the monitors registered another surge of synchronized neural activity at the touch. Dr. Anderson, who had remained through the night to witness this unprecedented recovery, began a careful examination. "This goes beyond anything we've documented in medical literature," he explained to his colleagues. "The level of neural recovery we're seeing, it's as if Rex somehow created a template for Jessica's consciousness to follow back." The news of Jessica's extraordinary awakening spread through the hospital like a wave of hope. Medical staff who had followed her case gathered outside the room, waiting for glimpses of this miracle they had witnessed unfolding. Dr. Chen's preliminary neural scans showed patterns that defied conventional understanding. "It's as if Rex's consciousness served as a bridge," he explained, pointing to the complex readings, "allowing Jessica's mind to find its way back through pathways we never knew existed." Throughout the morning, Jessica's strength continued to grow. Her responses became stronger, more coordinated. But what fascinated the medical team most was how her movements remained perfectly synchronized with Rex's subtle cues. "It's like they're still connected on some fundamental level," Sarah observed, watching as Rex anticipated her mother's needs before she could express them. "They're operating as one unit, just like they did during their police work, but on a much deeper level." Dr. Rodriguez had begun compiling her observations into what would become a groundbreaking paper. "What we've witnessed here challenges everything we thought we knew about consciousness, recovery, and the boundaries between species," she explained to her research team. The physical therapy staff reported extraordinary progress in Jessica's recovery. Movements that should have taken weeks to remaster came naturally, guided by Rex's intuitive support and their shared consciousness. "It's as if they've created their own language of healing," the lead therapist noted, watching Rex guide Jessica through exercises with perfect synchronization, something that bypasses all our traditional methods of rehabilitation. As evening approached, the medical team gathered to discuss the implications of what they had witnessed. The data they had collected would revolutionize their understanding of recovery and consciousness, but the profound bond between Jessica and Rex transcended scientific explanation. Sarah sat beside her mother's bed, watching as Jessica stroked Rex's fur, with increasing strength. The monitors continued to show their neural patterns, dancing in perfect harmony, telling a story of connection that science was only beginning to understand. The sun set over Chicago, casting long shadows through the hospital window, but the room remained filled with a different kind of light, the glow of a miracle that had unfolded within its walls, and the promise of understanding that would change medical science forever. 3 months after the extraordinary night that changed medical history, Jessica Hall stood at the entrance of Chicago General Hospital, Rex faithfully by her side. The autumn breeze rustled through their hair as they prepared to leave the place that had witnessed their miraculous journey. "Ready to go home, partner?" Jessica asked, her voice strong and clear. Rex's tail wagged in response, but his eyes remained focused on her, with the same intensity that had helped guide her back to consciousness. Dr. Anderson and Dr. Rodriguez stood nearby, still amazed by the recovery they had documented. The case had become legendary within medical circles, spawning new fields of research into the connections between human and animal consciousness. "The latest scans show something remarkable," Dr. Rodriguez explained, showing Jessica the final results. "The neural bridge you and Rex created hasn't diminished. If anything, it's grown stronger. You've literally rewritten what we thought was possible in medical science." Sarah watched her mother gather her belongings, remembering the countless hours spent in this hospital, witnessing a miracle that defied explanation. The bond between Jessica and Rex had not only survived her recovery, but had evolved into something even more profound. "Your case is being studied at medical schools across the country," Dr. Anderson shared. "But the truth is, we've only begun to understand what you and Rex have shown us about the power of connection." The hospital staff had gathered to bid farewell to their most remarkable patient. Many had been transformed by what they witnessed, not just the medical miracle, but the depth of devotion between a woman and her canine partner. Jessica paused at the hospital entrance, turning to address the assembled crowd. "Science can explain a lot of things," she said, her hand resting on Rex's head, "but some connections go beyond explanation. Rex didn't just help me recover. He showed us all that love and loyalty can bridge any gap, even the ones we think are impossible to cross." As they walked toward Sarah's waiting car, Dr. Rodriguez made one final note in her research journal. "Perhaps," she wrote, "the greatest breakthrough isn't in what we can measure or quantify, but in accepting that some bonds transcend our understanding." The drive home took them past familiar landmarks: the park where they used to patrol, the lake where they had spent countless mornings. But everything looked different now, transformed by their shared journey and deeper connection. At home, Jessica and Rex settled into their favorite spot by the window. The neural monitoring equipment was gone, but their synchronization remained visible in subtle ways. Their matched breathing, their coordinated movements, their unspoken understanding. Sarah watched them from the doorway, amazed at how natural they made it seem. "You know," she said, "when I was little, you told me that true partnerships were built on trust and understanding. I never really knew what that meant until now." The medical journals would later publish extensive studies about their case. Research teams would spend years analyzing the data, trying to understand how a German shepherd had helped rewrite the rules of consciousness and recovery. But for Jessica and Rex, the explanation was simpler. It was about a connection that transcended the boundaries between species, a love that could bridge any gap. As the sun set over Chicago, casting long shadows across their living room floor, Jessica and Rex sat together in comfortable silence. Their story had changed medical science, challenged assumptions about consciousness, and inspired countless others. But more than that, it had proved that some bonds are eternal, transcending the limits of what we think is possible. Their journey had shown the world that true healing comes not just from medicine and science, but from connections that run soul deep. In the end, it wasn't about the miracle of recovery. It was about the extraordinary power of a love that refused to be bounded by conventional understanding. And as night fell over the city they had once protected together, Jessica and Rex remained united, their bond a testament to the endless possibilities that exist when hearts connect beyond the boundaries of the known world. Dear listeners, we hope the extraordinary journey of Jessica and Rex has touched your hearts as deeply as it has touched ours. Their story reminds us that the most powerful connections in life often transcend our understanding. If you've been moved by this tale of unconditional love and miraculous healing, please subscribe to our channel and leave a like on this video. Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear about the special bonds in your own lives. Don't forget to check out our playlist of equally inspiring stories by clicking the link to your left. Join our community as we continue to explore the remarkable connections that make life truly extraordinary. Until our next story, remember that sometimes the most profound miracles happen in the space between hearts.